What's going on, everybody? This is Jerome Moore, host and creator of Deep Dish Conversations. And firstly, I want to say thank you for all love and support, and thank you for exploring the perspectives of social change with me on this platform. I want to encourage you all to like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube and on your favorite podcast listen platform. And make sure you give us a 5-star rating if you're loving the Deep Dish Conversations. I appreciate all of the support again. I hope you all enjoy this episode.
This is deep dish, right?
Yeah, well, let's get deep.
So I'm going deep on both sides.
Councilwoman Poterfield, Delishia Poterfield. How you doing? Welcome to the platform.
Thank you. I'm wonderful. Thank you for having me here.
No, I'm excited to go into our conversation. So many things have happened. Just during your campaigning time, so many issues, so many crises. Excuse me, that is just coming up, and you are a candidate for the House District 52. And a lot of stuff is happening at the state legislature. And Nashville being a blue dot in a very red state, the state legislature is an important institution where we need people to try to combat a lot of these harmful bills that are affecting us every day. And it will affect our future generations to come. And so before we get into all that meat and potatoes, I want to get into like your journey and who you are, right? That's why I love what kind of most about these conversations, like get to ask y'all, where did this urge to get into political spaces and combat harmful stuff and fight for people power, like where did that come from? So where did that journey start for you and that inspiration?
Absolutely. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share that. So it's kind of two parts to that story. In my mind, this started when I moved, after I graduated from TSU, I moved out to the Antioch community, got really active with like my church and volunteering in my community. But when I think back on it, this actually started when I was a little girl. So I'm a lifelong Tennessean, born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee. And one thing that I saw from being a child is that I always had this strong commitment to like justice and fairness. So I'm in elementary school and I'm reading like Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. I'm reading Coming of Age in Mississippi. Like I'm reading all of these books about like the civil rights movement, and no one in my family is doing this. These aren't books that have been assigned to us in school. It was just something that I was like really passionate about. I remember being in elementary school and knocking door to door for Willie Harrington, which was the first black mayor of Memphis. So I'm a little girl. I don't know anything that's what's happening, but what I know is
you canvassing.
Like, what I know is like, man, this is an opportunity to get somebody that looked like us to be the mayor. And as a child in elementary school, I didn't really know what that meant, but I knew that I wanted somebody that looked like me to like represent me. So I think that's like where it started, but I didn't quite like realize that. So, went to Howard University in DC, transferred to TSU. I'm a Southern girl at heart, so I had to get back down south, and fell in love with Nashville. So moved to the Antioch community, started volunteering in my community. I was really active in my church. I was at Mount Zion. So I'm teaching children's church, in public schools. And what I saw was that our schools were like severely underfunded. Teachers weren't making enough money. Support staff wasn't making enough money. The families that we were servicing wasn't making enough money. So I started going to like city council meetings because I wanted to figure out how do we get more money into our school system. So 2018, started going to all of these, budget meetings. I'm trying to figure out the process, and I testify before the council, and I'm on a teacher salary, and it was, hundreds of people that testified that night, and tons of teachers. I was one of about 5 people that testified for paraprofessionals, which are the teacher's assistants in special education. And in that testimony, I talked about, because in that budget hearing, someone asked, like, what do paraprofessionals do? And no one could really answer that question. So being a special education teacher, I was able to answer that. So I answered it before the body. And I said, these are the people that are working with our most vulnerable students. They're getting kicked, spit on, they're changing diapers, they're feeding kids that can't feed themselves, they're chasing kids that's running out of the building. They're doing this with fidelity. They're doing what they love, but they are making on average $20,000 a year. So how do you survive in Nashville, on a salary of $20,000? Well, that year, what I found out was that was one of the few things that they put money back in the budget for, was for the paraprofessional pay. The very next year, I decided, hey, actually that year when the budget vote happened, the budget vote fell by 1 vote. and I was in the galley, and I was just, kind of had a little tear running down my face. And I was texting some friends, and one person said, "There's only one thing left to do, vote." And I said, "Or run." So that was the moment that I made the decision that, like, if somebody's got to be making these decisions, like, why not me?
Right.
So the next year, I ended up running for office. I won by 25 votes. So if anyone ever says, like, their vote does not matter, their vote does not count, like, I won by 25 votes. And what I found was, as I was introducing myself to my new colleagues, one of my colleagues said, "I know exactly who you are. You spoke to us last year about the paraprofessionals, and because of your testimony, that was one of the few things that we actually put back in the budget." And it just really, like, touched me because it made me realize that, one, they really do listen, because people always think like they don't listen to us, like they really do listen. But two, it made me realize that I have the ability to get people to listen, like I have the ability to touch people's hearts and minds, and I'm able to be effective that way. So that's what really started me on this journey.
And so that was another thing that I was really curious about, that I want to know when I was doing my top secret research, is that you're a special education coach. Was. That ain't something many people are signing up to do, career wise, right? What led you to get in that type of profession in education, to work with, again, the most vulnerable, the most ones that kind of get ignored, people overlook? We have these stereotypes about and really don't understand many times, especially as adults and as students at times. What led you to that in that journey? I'm just curious about that, because I just know that ain't the easiest job for any educator to do. So you have to have a special place in your heart to really care about people in general, to specifically focus on that community.
Yeah, you're making me tear up. So again, since I was a child, like I just had this heart and passion for people and helping people. So I knew from the time that I was 5 years old that I wanted to be a teacher, to the extent that I would be in my room, like pretending to teach like my teddy bears and things like that. I'm like, how to do things, like how to give yourself a bath and how to wash your hands.
Right.
And I just always knew I wanted to be a teacher, but I never knew exactly like what I wanted to teach. So when I was in college and I started taking these classes, just trying to really figure out like what my path, my undergrad degree is in Africana Studies. So it's in like Africa and her diaspora and the people of color, the descendants of Africa, like our history. That's what I focused on for undergrad. And for grad school, I went back to get a master's in education, but I didn't know what I wanted to teach, because I love math and I'm really good at it. And most people think that they hate math, but it's because it hasn't been presented in a way that they really understand. So I was going to teach either math or history, because those are things I was super passionate about. And all teachers have to go through a class about students with disabilities. And what I found was that it just clicked to me. Like I understood, like the first time I heard something, even before cracking the book open, like there were just things that made sense to me. And there were so many people that sometimes people feel like, we other people that are different, right? And it's like, those kids belong over here in that classroom. Those kids belong with that teacher. And I was able to see like, no, our kids deserve an exposure to the best and highest curriculum. And what can we do to help these students like be successful? So I was just like naturally drawn to it. So I started teaching in 2010, and my career just pivoted. Like after just a couple of years of teaching, I think my second year I was already the department head.
Wow.
Then I went to a second school, and I was able to, same thing. I was in all these like leadership abilities. And then after 4 years of teaching, an opportunity came up to be a special education coach. And it's people that teach 20 years that don't get, that don't get that job. But I just had such a passion about it and such a strong understanding. When we see kids that are acting a certain way, most people, their minds just go to kind of like old school, like, oh, they bad, they need a whooping, they need a punishment. My mind goes to, why is that child acting that way? What type of supports can we put in place to help them? Has anyone ever taught them that this is inappropriate behavior? And in many cases, they haven't. So you have kids that would do the right thing if you just taught them, but because they don't know that what they're doing is like wrong or inappropriate, no one's ever taken the time to deal with that and to properly teach them. we're not giving those kids the best opportunities for success. So as a special education coach, I was able to I worked in schools in East Nashville, I worked in schools in Antioch, worked in schools in North Nashville, all over the city. I was able to work with families and special education teachers as they worked with their students, so we can say, hey, okay, this is what this child is doing. Well, let's think about why they're doing it, and let's put supports in place so that they could be successful. Just a couple of weeks ago, I ran into a student from Whites Creek High School. Everyone was just like, this kid, he's falling asleep in class, he's skipping class, he just had all of these issues, right? And the thought was, and the individuals were very well meaning, but it's like, okay, he's breaking the rules. So when you break a rule, there's a consequence, there's a punishment. So, what do we need to look at for truancy? What do we need to look at for this? Trying to figure out like how we can like get this kid on track. And I started looking at his data, and I'm like, his grades are amazing. Like, he's outperforming everybody. Talk to the school psychologist, talk to him, very intelligent young man. I was like, let's get him tested for gifted. Well, come to find out, the young man was gifted, and he was so bored in classes that there was no incentive for him to go to those classes. He also was dealing with a lot of things like with his family. He was going, house to house, couch to couch. So there was no consistency. There was no consistent transportation. There was no reason for him to come to school every day. So when they were looking at getting this young man certified as emotionally disturbed, which was going to have impacts on his future based on his behavior, I was able to work with them, and he was able to get a gifted diagnosis instead, which was a more appropriate diagnosis for him. And he was able to, graduate high school without that negative label. I bumped into him about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he remembered who I was, which is amazing because I work with thousands of kids, so I don't expect him to remember me. But he remembered who I was, and he said, you were the only person that saw something in me. Like, you were the only person that took the time to figure out what was going on with me. And instead of looking at me as like a troublemaker, you looked at me as a person, and you saw what was wrong, and you helped me. So I've just always had this, like, I'm a problem solver, and I want to help people. So I don't look at it as a problem. I look at it as, what can we do to put supports in place so that you could be successful, so you could be the best version of yourself.
Well, this is a good pivot because when we say we have a lot of problems going on right about now.
Yeah, we do.
And so before we get into these problems, I wanna throw this word out to you. Justice. It's a loaded word, powerful word. It can be a lot to unpack and mean. It can mean something different to different people. And so as a candidate for House District 52, as a councilwoman, what does justice mean to you? And what does that look like?
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head, right? Like, justice means different things to different people. When I think of justice, I think like just the base of the word. What is just? Like, what is fair? What is equitable? So for me, justice looks like making sure that people are able to live in this city, live in this state, making sure that things are equitable for people, making sure that we're removing the barriers so that people can be successful, so that people can be the best version of themselves. Like, at the end of the day, like, people try to like other us, and the Republicans are this, the Democrats are that, the independents are this, women are this, men are that. Like, people try to like other us, but at the end of the day, everybody wants the same thing. We want to be able to go to work. We want some money in our pocket. We want a roof over our head. We want our kids to have access to quality education. We want access to healthcare. Like, we want a quality of life, So to me, justice looks like making sure that we can exist, that we can have a quality of life without having to worry about, unjustly being pulled over or profiled, or worry about, if I, drive to work today, am I going to make it back home to my family? Right. So for me, justice looks like, do I have a fair shot at this quality of life that I'm hoping to receive? And
so what type of justice do we need at the House right now? And I know your constituency is District 52. But what does that look like with you potentially in that seat? There's many crises going on right now. Housing crises, criminalization of homelessness crises, anti-blackness crises, a white supremacy crises, educational crises.
Let's not forget the crises impacting women's body autonomy.
Reproductive justice crises, right? How does your definition and your understanding of justice play a part into kind of attacking and combating and figuring out the best way to bring justice around all those people that affect people in different ways?
Yeah. I would say the first thing that comes to mind is like wisdom, right? So as a legislator, you have to have wisdom to know how to fight certain battles. So there are battles that I fought on council that are fought with legislation. There are other battles that I have fought that is working with administration and working with department heads. There are other battles that I fought that have been working with community, building a coalition and addressing a problem through community organization. So any fight that we have, you have to use wisdom to determine, like, is this the fight where I stand up and speak truth to power, and I know that this isn't going to get anywhere. I know that this bill is going to fail. But at the end of the day, I'm going on record and I'm bringing attention to this issue, and I'm standing up and I'm being a voice for people that feel like they are the voiceless. And then there are other times when you say, okay, this can be addressed through legislation. This is the way that we're going to get this type of justice. So I'll just give you an example. We saw with the Dobbs ruling, Roe v. Wade was overturned, right? Which is obviously just a terrible thing for not only women, but for trans men and non-binary individuals. Like anyone who has or had a uterus is, severely impacted by this decision. We know that we have this trigger law in the state of Tennessee. So we know that reproductive rights aren't existent right now in Tennessee at a state level. So to combat that, like, what can we do at a local level? So the day that the decision came out, I brought forth legislation that is requesting the police make this their lowest priority, because the police don't need to spend their time investigating abortions or allegations of abortions. It's calling upon the administration to say, we don't want any of our tax dollars and we don't want any city staff to be used to investigate allegations of abortions. It's calling upon MDHA to come up with rules so that no one will be discriminated with regards to housing because of their reproductive history or because of anything that they may choose, as well as calling upon HR to make sure that there are ordinances in place so that there is not job discrimination. So that's one set, right? Then we have another piece of legislation that's being introduced Tuesday, in which we're asking for the employee health board, and this is for Metro employees, but we're asking for the health board to set aside a fund. So if someone wants to get a service that's not provided here in Tennessee, like a medical service, and they need to go out of state to get that, we want to make sure that we're able to reimburse like travel costs and lodging and things of that nature, because we want to make sure that people have access to reproductive health rights. So, to me, that justice work, that fight looks like we may lose a fight on one front. And when that ruling came down, we lost that fight on that front. But there are still so many other things to do. Like, we can't be hopeless. Like, we can't give up. We still have to say, okay, that didn't work out. Now what's the solution? What else can we do? If they're criminalizing houselessness, okay, so what can we do to provide more housing for people? One of the biggest issues is state preemption. So, we call it state interference. I've spoken across the nation on this. I actually speak in Denver the day after the election. I'll be in Denver speaking at a national conference about state preemption and what happens in Tennessee, and it happens in Florida, it happens in Texas. So you see a pattern that this is happening in red states in the South, where a group of legislators are making decisions for the people of that state unfairly, and they're not allowing the local municipalities to do their job. So a lot of times people will get upset with like the local elected officials, like, why didn't y'all do this? Why didn't y'all do that? Before I was elected, the council passed something that was effectively decriminalizing cannabis. And if you were caught with a small amount of cannabis, the officer had the discretion of whether or not to write you a ticket or to arrest you, which discretion, we know that could be problematic as well. However, it was a way so that, we can like reduce the people in the pipeline, like getting locked up, right? The state came back and said, you can't do that. We look at things like inclusionary housing. We look at things like local hire, and the state state always comes back and say, well, you can't do those things. So we will pass legislation on the local level, and in that next session, the state will come back and just gut it.
Right.
So we have to make sure that we're speaking up on that and letting them know, like you're tying our hands, and we can't best serve our communities when we're being preempted at every level. And that comes through personal relationships. I've gotten more passed on counsel with personal relationships. You know, I've had people that didn't believe in what I was fighting for, or they didn't think that this was the right way to do it. But based on personal relationships with people, you know, that is what gets people to actually sit down and listen and let me hear your point of view. You know, and we know that some people are extremists. Right. You know, we have to fight back against the extremists. You never back down on like the core beliefs of what we believe in. Right. Like we're never going to back down on racial justice, social justice, reproductive rights, rights for the LGBTQIA plus community, voting rights. Like we're not going to back down on those things. We're not going to back down when it comes to things like healthcare. But there are things that it's impacting me the same way it's impacting them. I sit in traffic on Murfreesboro Road the same way that the Republican legislators coming in from Rutherford County sit on the traffic on Murfreesboro Road. So that's not a blue or red issue. That's an issue of how do we work together to improve the quality of life for all of our constituents.
And so relationships, you know, right now, currently in the House and in the Senate, and pretty much everywhere, state legislator, in here in Tennessee, the Republicans are a supermajority, meaning that in both chambers, regardless of, you know, Democrats show up or not, they can pretty much get anything passed at this given point. How do you use your experience on council in building those relationships and understanding which fronts to fight on? How do you plan to use that experience in the House? And also, how do you plan on being transparent with expectations, understanding the current dynamic of what's going on in that state legislature of Republicans being a supermajority, so community understands, like, oh, okay, I understand why certain things are just going to get passed, and I understand why certain things may be able to get stopped. Yeah. But this is a dynamic. How do you use that experience, and how do you be transparent with community members and specifically constituents of District 52, so they're not just thinking like anything is just going, but it's like it's only so much that you could possibly do?
Absolutely. So, so we know, like we said, we know that they're a right-wing extremists. Like we know that, right? So that's on the table, right. Front and center. That's on the table. What I found when I got on council, there was a certain council member that I completely disagreed with on every single thing. I mean, like if I said the sky was blue, they said the sky was red. Like the simplest thing, we just had very different beliefs. So the first thought is again to other them. Like, what's wrong with them? Why can't they see that, you know, this is going to negatively impact people? I heard a quote once, and it was along the lines of, you can't, and I think this was, I feel like this was like a Facebook status from Tequila Equity, from Equity Alliance. So I want to give her credit because that's where I read it. But it was along the lines of, you can't tell a man how hot the ground is if he's always wearing shoes, you know? And what I saw was that if you've never had to make the decision between paying your light bill and paying your water bill, if you've never had to make the decision between paying for groceries and buying medication, you cannot conceptually understand what that is. What you mean? I'm gonna pay all of it. Right. You know, like you just fundamentally cannot understand that. Right. So what I found was this person that was diabolically on the other side, they were representing their community. They were it was people that believed like them. Right. It was people, they were doing their job. Their job was to represent the people that elected them. And this is what their people wanted. So my job was to represent the people that elected me. So once I looked at that person as a human, albeit flawed, you know, albeit their doctrine was flawed, albeit they are totally on a different side of an issue. When I saw them as a human, I was able to then almost take like the emotions out of it, because sometimes we get so hung up on like the emotions of like, how could you do this? This is wrong. This is evil. And now you're not able to use strategy. Right. So now that I see you as a person, now I can use strategy. What's important to you? All right, being fiscally responsible is important to you. So now I got this social justice issue, and I'm able to spin this not on the social justice lens, because that's the lens that I care about, but I'm able to spin it on your lens and make you care about it and show you, you know what? This policy is being fiscally irresponsible because we haven't reviewed this contract in 20 years. And per our policy, we have to review this contract every 5 years.
Right.
So we need to kill this contract so that we have the opportunity to review it to determine if this is the best use of taxpayer dollars. So you have to speak their language.
Right.
So for me, killing this contract is a social justice thing. It's the right thing to do, but I'm not going to sit there because I'm going to lose that fight every time.
Right.
Like, because we don't have the same morals.
Right.
So if I try to fight you with my morals and say you should care about what I care about, it's not going to happen. But if you're in the majority, I'm going to have to explain it the way that you can understand it to try to get leverage on it.
Right.
So I think that's really important. To your point, we are in the super minority. The Democrats have been able to pass legislation, but they've not been able to pass legislation with a fiscal note. You know, what that is going to take, just being transparent, what that is going to take is getting more Democrats elected across the state. And so many times people feel like, well, the Democrats didn't do nothing for me, the Republicans didn't do nothing for me. So people have this feeling of being let down by previous, administrations or previous elected officials. We have to make sure that we are electing people that believe the same way that we believe, that have the same type of moral compass that we have, and we have to get more of us in office. And that means across the state. Nashville is going to be blue. Memphis is going to be blue. How are we making sure that we get some blue people in Rutherford County? How are we making sure that in East Nashville we're electing Democrats? How are we making sure that we're out here in these rural counties and we're funding candidates that believe the same way that we believe so that we can have more political power in our state?
Right.
So those are some things I think are really important. And then lastly, you asked about transparency. That's all about being in community and being in coalitions with individuals that are in the community. So that looks like sharing information like with your constituents, whether that is through social media, through newsletters, whether that's through community meetings, but also in your coalition building. Because I've worked with coalitions before and I've had to explain to them like, okay, we're working on this issue together. You're bringing the issue to me. You are the expert on that issue, and you are closest to the people that are being impacted on that issue. Well, I'm the expert on legislation, and I'm the person that could come up with some strategy to say, let's take this approach. But it takes us trusting each other so that hey, we're on the same page. We want the same thing. I may have to argue this in a way that you don't love, but this is what we have to do to get that legislation passed.
A lot going on.
Yeah.
a lot going on. Excuse me. A lot going on, and I'm glad you broke that down too, because I think just political awareness around what happens at the state legislature and is really crucial, because most people are not going down to the state legislature when it's open and kind of seeing what's happening. Most people are at work, trying to make a living or making a living. You're black and you're a woman. Two crucial things, I believe, especially at this given time and moment with things being the way that they are. How do those two dynamics play a part of who you are, but also your approach on things in the political sphere, and just socially, and just how you do what you do in these spaces that you're in?
So I think about, W.E.B. Du Bois. I think about like the quote unquote talented 10th. I think about the double consciousness, in all times, in all spaces. I have to be a certain way. Like I have to be extra polished, and people want like authenticity. And I have to balance like being my authentic self with also being someone that people will take serious, I have to make sure that at the end of the day, I'm not selling myself out and I'm staying true to who I am and who I believe. But I also have to make sure that I'm able to be effective with the people that I have to work with. So here's an example. When I ran for office the first time, my first name's Delishia. You hear that name, that's a black woman. The first time I ran for office, I was told, don't run with that name. You're not going to get elected. So you need to run as D, or D Danielle, or something like that, because my middle name's Danielle. So it was like, you need to run, and that was just a hard stop for me. No, this is my name.
Right.
I'm gonna get elected with this name. If Lonnell Matthews, if Jacobia Dowell, if Taneka Vercher, if they can get elected with their names, why can't I get elected with my name?
Right.
So that was a hard stop for me. Well, another one was my hair. I typically don't wear my hair like this, but my hair is natural. So I'm not going to straighten my hair to make people more comfortable with me. But I usually wear my hair twisted. Right. That's authentically who I am. I like to wear my hair like that. And it's also, a little more socially accepted. And it's hard. It is hard because you're always in a space of, people in your community may feel like you're not black enough, but then you're also in a space where other people will tell you that you're too black. I had people, when I was running for office, I had people in the community say to me, you're too black, you're gonna fight for too many issues for black people. And it's like, what does that mean?
What does that even mean?
Like, what does that mean? My background's in special education, and one thing that we teach people is that when you're looking at accessibility, if you provide accessibility for the people that need the most, everybody benefits. So here's an example. If it's snowing outside and you got a set of stairs with snow and you got a ramp with snow and you got a person in a wheelchair, if you clear off the stairs first, everybody else gets to go, but the person in the wheelchair has to wait until you clear off the ramp. But if you clear off the ramp first, the person in the wheelchair can go, and the kids that don't use wheelchairs are able to go up that ramp as well. Right. So when you provide access to the most vulnerable, that provides access for everybody.
Right.
So we have to make sure that we're looking at the most vulnerable in our community and making sure that we're providing access for everybody. So it's hard because you are constantly being criticized with like how you speak. It is the constant. Did I say too much? Did I was my voice inflection okay? Right. Am I coming off too aggressive? Do I look like the angry black woman? If I get up here and I cry because I'm happy because I just changed people's lives by lifting people up out of poverty by giving a $5 million raise, or if I cry because this legislation failed and I know the impacts of this, I know that somebody's going to get harmed from this, or I know that, somebody's not going to have gas money to get to work. If I cry, does that make me look weak? Does that make me look emotional? If I show anger in my voice, do I now look like the angry black woman? So it is just this constant, and that is like something that, black men have their own set of things that they have to unpack. But that is like this unique space that other women don't have to deal with. That's a unique space that black men don't have to deal with. But as a black woman, you're just constantly like under that microscope. And it's also the thought that like, give it to a black woman, she can handle it. Like we could save the world. Right. Like we are running our families, we are running our churches, we are running civic organizations, community groups, and then you still have your job like as a legislator. So you are carrying all of these different things, and you can't drop one of them, because the minute that you drop one, people are gonna see, I told you.
Right.
I told you.
Waiting for you.
Yeah, I had someone tell me that I shouldn't run for office because I'm a single mom. And they literally said, well, who's going to be at home with your child? And I'm like, first of all, my child's a teenager. She's very well taken care of. Shout out to her dad. We co-parent. Shout out to her grandma. They, we have a very good support system. And my child is, makes all A's and B's, doesn't get in trouble. My family is taken care of. Right. But to say that I should not run for office because I'm a single mom, right. Are you telling it to other people? So it's just like,
right. I wonder if they asked you that if you were not a black woman.
I don't know. And what about, at that time it was a married man in the race who had a business with small children. And it's just like, okay, like he still has responsibilities to his family too, right? So So why is it that you think that I can't juggle my responsibilities, but, it's okay? Are you saying that only the mother should be at home with the children? What about fathers being home with the children,
Exactly.
So it's just these very unfair expectations that are put on you, and you're constantly under this microscope and just feeling like you cannot fail. Like failure is not an option, because it's not just about you. It's about women everywhere and black women everywhere. And if I fail, if I embarrass myself, I'm not just embarrassing myself, I'm embarrassing all of us. So it's just this immense amount of pressure at all times.
That was heavy. And I'm not a Black woman. So I don't understand. I get it, but I would never get it. Right.
Yeah.
Where does your strength to continue these fights come from? Where does that support come from? Because it's not easy constantly every day, especially when you make it part of your life to fight for social justice. And sometimes you need a break and you need a rest. And if you feel like you can't take that because people are waiting for you to drop the ball, that's a lot. That's a lot of mental, physical, spiritual, emotional pressures and stress, right? How do you continue to keep going? What does your support system look like?
Yeah.
And how do you keep doing what you do?
Yeah, it's probably cliche, and I know I'm probably a little naive when it comes to this, but I truly believe that we can make a better world. So I think about my daughter who was born here in Nashville, lifelong Nashvilleian, and I think about what is the legacy I'm leaving to her. What type of world will she grow up in? What type of world will my grandchildren grow up in? So, excuse me. So even when I'm thinking about decisions, I'm thinking about how does this impact us today, but how is this going to impact my community in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years? So I'm constantly just thinking like, what can I do to make this place better than what it already is? And what can I do to leave a legacy to my children and my children's children? I'm also just really like optimistic. I believe like one of my favorite things to watch during the pandemic was Hamilton. I loved it. And for the first time, I felt connected to the fabric of America. And to see people that look like me talk about the founding of this country. And it's a line that they say, and I cry every time I hear it. And they say, tomorrow there'll be more of us.
Right.
And I look at it, and we're together now. But it's just, we have to come together. With one finger, you could poke somebody and do some damage. But with 5 fingers, when you make a fist, when we come together, the force that you put behind it. And I'm just optimistic with the thought that if we keep working together and we keep chipping at this, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And if we just keep taking one bite and one bite and one bite, we get to a place where we've made a difference.
Right.
And I lean on what I've already done. I started off talking about, paraprofessionals made an average of $20,000 and fighting to get more money in the budget for them in 2018. Well, just last week, I was able to sponsor and pass legislation that got an extra $5 million in the budget for support staff for our lowest paid metro workers, lifting them up closer to a living wage so that people can start off at $30,000 a year. And I look at those victories, and to some people, that's like a small victory because they're going to say it's not enough. You're right, it's not enough.
Right.
But it makes a huge difference when you're going from, if you're going from $20 to $25 an hour.
Right.
That makes a huge difference for the quality of life for your family. That means somebody won't have to work 3 jobs. Maybe they could work 2.
Right.
And I get it. The idea is that they just work 1.
Right.
But if we can get them working 2, that's more time with their family.
Right.
That's a better quality of life for them. If we can get people going from 2 jobs to 1 job, it's a better quality of life for them. Right. So I'm encouraged by what we've already done and with the hope that we can continue to do more.
You're speaking about bites, 1 bite at a time. I want to give you this opportunity to really kind of unpack the issues that you kind of really want to focus on if elected to the House for District 52, and where you want to, what kind of impact you want to have on the issues. I know a lot of times, candidates, y'all get a minute or 2 to try to hit on things, but I want to give you, how much time as you need to really tell us what are some of the things you feel is important and urgent. And we're going to get into that word urgency after that, but it's really urgent for you that we need to kind of like hit on now. And again, specifically for constituents of District 52.
Absolutely. So there's this duality, right? When you are an elected official right now, I'm the councilwoman of District 29. So I represent the people of District 29 first and foremost, but I also have a responsibility to the city as a whole. And the decisions that I make impact the city as a whole. So the same thing with District 52, House District 52. My first priority is to the people of that district and that community, but I also understand that you are carrying for the whole state and you are being impactful for the whole state. So I'm going to say once elected, because I believe speak things that are not as though they were.
Speak
You
it
got to
into
speak it
existence.
into existence. So what I will say is once elected, my first set of priorities are things that are going to impact the constituents of District 52 with a big focus on issues that also impact everyone in the state. Right. So, of course, we're looking at like social justice issues. We're looking at, the criminalization of houselessness. We're looking at women's reproductive rights. We're looking at voter rights. Like these are things that have to happen. Gun laws. Like these are things that have to happen that we have to address. And that is very urgent. But I'm also really focused on what is going to make the quality of life of the people in my district better. So case in point, we look at education funding. So many people don't know this, but with our BEP formula, the poorest parts of Tennessee, the most rural counties, they pay about 10% of their school budget, and the state pays about 90%. On average, the state pays 75% of everyone else's budget, and they pay 25%. In Nashville and Sevier County, we're paying 70% of our own budget, and the state is only paying 30%. We have to fight for our fair share, and we have to get more money for our funding for education, and that benefits everyone, whether you have children or not. Because one, more funding for schools means our students are better educated. That means a better workforce. So if you're a business owner, you want a better quality workforce. And our schools are already getting the job done. They're doing more with less. But imagine what they could do if we were able to get them more funding.
Right.
But that also means that some of that funding, it loosens up some of our funding in the city. So just like you have your house budget, and if you're paying more on groceries and gas this month, that means that you're having to pull money away from somewhere else. So it's the same thing. If we can get more funding for education to our city, that means that our city can free up some of those resources for some of the things that they care about, like sidewalks and traffic calming and more firefighters, more firehouse, things of that nature. So that's a big one for me. Also, when we're looking at like infrastructure, things like traffic and congestion, and we think about the traffic on our state routes, like how do we help alleviate some of that congestion? How do we alleviate some of that traffic so that people aren't spending so much time? Because I'll tell you, sometimes if there's a wreck in my neighborhood, it may take 30 minutes just to get out, because I live out, close to a peninsula. It might take 30 minutes just to get out of that community to funnel into traffic on Murfreesboro Road. So how do we deal with, work with and partner with and get more investment in our community so that we can address these infrastructure needs? How do we make sure that our city and state employees are getting equitable pay so that they can have a quality of life and that they can make a living wage with access to good jobs and good benefits, so that we create these pathways out of poverty? People are afraid. They're afraid that they're going to be priced out of their community. They're afraid that they're not going to be able to live in the city that they love, the city that they've worked hard to build. The people are what make Nashville. Our people are our custodians, our bus drivers, people that are working in restaurants, people that are you go to a city office or state office, the people at the front desk that greet you. These are the people that make our city run. And those people should be able to afford to live here without being afraid that they're going to lose their home, whether that's in foreclosure or, the neighborhood is rapidly changing around them and they feel like they have to leave. These are issues that we have to address. And many times, like, those aren't the sexy issues, right? Like the sexy issues are like, yeah, we're going to fight for reproductive rights. We're going to fight for LGBTQIA rights. We're going to fight for voting rights and social justice. Those, and I'm absolutely going to fight for those things. Absolutely. But we also have to get back to the basics on what makes the quality of life for the people in that community better and how we can address those things.
No, thank you for breaking that down because I think it's just important for people to know um, what those issues are, but also that there's different spectrums on these issues, and the larger issues take time.
Yeah.
So we can't forget about, like you said, going back to the basics, things that affect every single community member in Nashville, greater Nashville area, like traffic,
Yeah.
like transportation. Um, Urgency. I want to get back to that word urgency, right? Because you named a lot of issues, challenges that we have right now, just not in our city, but throughout the country. And everybody, you hear this, we have to be urgent. We need to take action now, right? Which I think means something different for everybody because, people are dying. People are being killed. People are being displaced, unhoused. It's been urgent, I think, for a long time,
Yeah.
right? And sitting on council, I think you understand the urgency to act, and you get the urgency from emails and phone calls from constituents in District 29, like, hey, we need to do something right today,
Yeah.
right? What does that urgency look like for you, and what does that mean given where we are now? And Roe v. Wade just being overturned, like things are getting crucial,
Yeah.
really quickly, right? And we have to devise ways and other tactics maybe that we haven't used before, in order to combat old problems. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and that's that's a great question. We have to take a layered approach. And this is what I mean by that. There are some things that take time to build out, and there are some things that we have to like address right now while we're building out those other systems. So for example, when we look at this last election and people look at, Georgia going blue, and when we look at like states getting flipped, and it's this sense of, oh, they did it, so we can do it too. They did do it. But do you know what it took for them to do it? Were you a part of those conversations 10 years ago, when they were building these tables and these coalitions? And during the election time, I was working with some of our swing states and working with elected officials in those swing states to provide resources to make sure that they had information to get out to their constituents so that we were working on, flipping these states.
Right.
And what I found, it was so beautiful being in community with people. And these are people that have been doing this work for like 10 years. So sometimes like somebody will come on the scene and, they get to kind of like take credit for a victory, but this is a victory that people have been building up for 10 years, right? So what that means to me is like when you have an urgent issue, you have to play the long game and what is the long-term plan to address this issue, but then also what is the immediate plan to address that issue. So case in point, I talked about the legislation I brought at the last meeting that got the extra $5 million. So when MNPS, they brought their budget, our mayor has a budget, our budget chair has a budget, MNPS brought this aspirational budget. The $5 million that I asked for was on top of all of that, right? And you hear people telling you, this isn't in the pay plan yet. If you give them an extra $5 million, what are they going to do with it? You hear this sense of like, can we wait until next year to give people a chance to like work through the pay plan, to give people a chance to determine how the money is going to be spent? And when I hear that, I think of the people that right now can't afford this $5 gallon, $5 gallon for gas.
Right.
I think of people right now that can't afford, milk and eggs, and how the prices have significantly gone up. So like you can't wait. You have to find solutions right now that we can use to address these issues in tandem with long-term solutions. So for me, that was getting assurance from, the school board, hey, if we get y'all this money, can y'all come up with this plan to make sure that it's spent appropriately? I believe in a very democratic process. I believe in co-governance. It's not just me as an elected official saying this is what I want. This is me working in community with other people. like who's representing those workers. In this case, it was SEIU. So, hey, I'm going to talk to SEIU. I'm going to talk to their representatives because they are representing the workers that are going to be impacted. Can we figure out a plan, and can we work with all of these different entities to make sure that this happens, right? So there's this immediate need of right now. They can't wait another year to get a raise. They have to have this right now, or else they're not going to be able to afford to do their job. So there's this sense of urgency that you have to do this right now. But then there's also when you rush and do things, a lot of times there are unintended consequences and there are missteps. So yes, we have to rush and do this right now, but then we also have to plan and say, okay, what's the long game? What issues, this is great that this happened, but what issues might this have caused? And how do we like plan for those issues in the future? What is the long-term plan to make sure that we're addressing these things?
And I think another great example is that is like the importance of this organizing is that you hear many organizers and activists and say the George Floyd raised that like that was a great movement, but it could have been more powerful if we was organized, and because we've already been seeing that, police murdering, black men, unarmed black men. We've been seeing that for years. So what if we would have started organizing and building to how do we combat this, or how do we, just make the most of the moment so it won't happen again, or we can shift like legislation like immensely when it happened, but we wouldn't really organize as a collective around those things. So it did like most things did. Yeah, it was an awakening for many people, right? An awakening, but many people was already too focused on that stuff, but a lot of us wasn't organized. So it was really well, but like as you see now, it just kind of it just died down. So I think what you bring up is that long game and understanding like, okay, it's not going to happen overnight. Sometimes we're battling systems,
Absolutely.
and so it takes a minute, it takes a while, and we have to be in community and communication with our council persons, or with our state legislators that are allies and understand the fight as well and willing to, have our backs.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought that up. Another urgent matter I want to bring up. You could easily stay, with the council, right? You could do another 4-year term if you wanted to. Why did you feel like this is the moment for you to be in the House and represent District 52?
Yeah, so when I first decided to run for office, I thought about like the issues that I was most passionate about. Sometimes people don't realize, in theory, but you don't know for real, like what's a state issue, like what's a local issue. So a lot of times people will call me with a state issue. And when you tell people like, oh, that's your state representative, you need to contact your senator, you need to contact, your state rep. Sometimes people get mad at you because they feel like you're kind of like passing the buck, but you wouldn't go to Burger King and order a Big Mac, right? Like you have to be at the right place to get what it is that you're asking for. So what I saw was that, there were all these issues that I was passionate about. Some of them were local level issues and some of them were state level issues. So I always knew that I wanted to do both. What I didn't know was that the trajectory would go so fast. Like what I didn't know was that the opportunity would present itself. I'm a battle-tested legislator. I've been successful in bringing legislation and passing legislation. I've held leadership opportunities. My colleagues trust my leadership. I'm currently serving as the chair of the Minority Caucus. I'm the vice chair of the Public Health and Safety Committee. I was the former education chair. I was the former vice chair of Budget and Finance. My colleagues trust my leadership, and I've been very effective in the time that I have been elected. Our current state rep served us well for 14 years, and he decided that he was not seeking re-election. So this is the time, this is the ideal time when we look at everything that's happening in our country right now. And especially, we've talked a lot about Dobbs and Roe v. Wade. We have to stop allowing men to make decisions for women and for women's bodies and for non-binary individuals, for trans men. We have to elect more women to make these decisions. And like women are the heartbeat of the community. Like if you think about back in the day, growing up and going to church, you know, a lot of times the pastor may have been a man and you had a deacon board that's men, but who's running the church? Like who is the one, the church secretary?
Women,
you know, the women of the church are the ones that are getting the work done. You look at our community organizations, you look at nonprofits, like women, we get it done, you know, and we're balancing things. We are wives and mothers. We are taking care of our family. We're making sure that there's groceries in the house. We're making sure that our children have good grades and that they're looking well kept. But then we're also out here doing this work in the community. So this is just, this is the time. Like this is just the ideal time. I think about District 52. It's primarily Antioch. It's Antioch and it's a small part of East Nashville. I know what people in East Nashville are looking at. I've worked in schools out there. I've worked with their families. I understand the issues that people are having out there. I've lived in Antioch for 20 years. I've lived in District 52 for 12 years. I know the issues that the people are facing. This is Antioch. This is the first time in more than 20 years that Antioch can have a representative that lives in their community. And that makes a difference because I can tell you what the issues are because I go through them every day.
Right.
So this is the time, you know, what better time than this? And if not now, then when?
Right. So I have to ask you this. You kind of answered part of my next question, but I have to ask you this too. The question was going to be, what makes you the best candidate? Because you do have an opponent, and it's weird a little bit. And when I had Justin on here, he was like, you know, me and Delishia were friends. And I told him like, yeah, but somebody has to win and somebody has to lose, right? And so, what makes you kind of? I think you hit on a lot of those points, but I want to just ask it anyway of like what makes you the best candidate. Is it primarily all of the things that you just stated, or is it other things as well that you want to hit on?
Yeah, a little bit of both, and I will say, Justin's right. We are friends.
Yeah.
You know, we've known each other for a really, really long time, and you know, I don't look at this because people are kind of like torn sometimes. You know, and people are like, "Oh." I
think if there was going to be a torn race, this might be the one. And like I told him, I said, I think if people could vote for both of y'all, they probably would.
Yeah.
You know, they probably would. But hey, this is also what makes, I think, democracy great.
Yeah.
That hey, you have options, and you know, and the community will speak. And I think what also makes this race in particular like a healthy one is we know whatever happens, both of you all are gonna do the work still. And gonna support one another. So it's not gonna be like, oh, I lost and you know, I'm just not gonna do anything. And so that's what I appreciate about both of you all. Like I know at the end of the day, y'all not gonna stop working.
Yeah.
You know, and so this is just for all the listeners and viewers out there. If y'all don't know, you know, this is just one of those races. So I'm gonna go ahead and let you speak on that.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And you're absolutely right. Regardless of the outcome, we're going to continue to do the work. And I don't look at this as, you know, like I'm running against someone. I'm running for the state of Tennessee, and I'm running for the people of District 52. And again, I'm a battle-tested legislator. I know what it means to work on legislation. I know what it means to withdraw legislation because maybe it's not going the way that it needs to go, or you need to work on it a little bit more. I know what it means to take a risk. I know what it means to make a hard decision and to have to make a hard decision in the heat of the moment. And you may think you're going to do one thing and it may surprise you. Right. I know what it means that the legislation I brought last week, it failed in committee. It 0 people voted for it in budget committee. 6 people voted against it and 6 people did not vote. So there was no way that legislation was supposed to pass. But I brought it in an unorthodox way, and I fought to make sure that it passed. So I have the skills, I have the voting record, I have the history. I've been on the right side of the issues, as in the correct side of the issues. I've built community with people. I've built coalitions. I've worked with a ton of various social justice organizations and nonprofits. to get this work done. And I think that we all have a lane, right? And we need activists, we need community organizers, we need legislators, we need judges, we need DAs, we need everybody that is on the side of justice. Like, we all have to row in the same direction to get us to where we need to go. And what I found very early on was I could do both. Like, I could work in the role of an activist. I could work in the role of a community organizer, but I have a niche that I can touch the hearts and minds of people and get them to vote with me. I've had people on the other side that do not agree with me tell me, when you spoke on the floor, you changed my vote. My colleagues have told me that they look at me as a moral compass on an issue. And if they're not knowing, they're kind of leaning both ways, because legislation is nuanced, and that's the conversation people don't want to have. They want to think that it's very cut or dry. Either you're with us or you're against us. But the reality is that legislation has caveats, and some things are good and some things are bad. And sometimes it's really hard decisions. It's not just always cut and dry. And my colleagues have told me, when you get up and speak, then I know that this is the right side of that issue. And I've just been very effective. People that don't agree with me, that have said, we don't agree politically at all, but you know your stuff, you're passionate, you do your research, and I know if you're standing for something that's the right thing, and I'm going to vote with you. So you have to, again, build those relationships. I have a proven track record of doing that. I'm in the community. I know what our community needs because I'm constantly having these conversations with our neighbors. You can give me a street in the community right now, and I can say, oh yeah, such and such live over there, and this is what they've been dealing with. Like, I can speak to what I've done in various parts of our district to bring respite to our community, to bring resources to our community. Again, this is Antioch's time to have somebody that knows the issues, that lives right there in the community. This is East Nashville's time to say, hey, she's been with us in our schools out here. I had somebody say, hey, I remember you. You were the lady that was out there at Warner when my kids were at Warner. When my kids were at Rosebank, you were out here helping us. So this is the opportunity to elect someone that they know is going to be in community with them, someone that's battle tested and trusted, someone that's been both in the community and on the legislative front, that's been effective. And this is just, this is the moment for that.
Do you foresee any challenges? This would be a new role, and have you thought about any challenges that you may have, or may outside of like just learn? It's a learning curve in anything new you step into. But outside of that, have you thought about any challenges, any pushback, any of those things that you're thinking about? How I'm going to use some of the things I've used in council or just in the community that I've been able to lean on to mitigate situations and get the best outcome that suits just not myself but people that I'm in relationship with.
Absolutely. You don't build a building without counting the cost. Right. Like that's Bible. Right. Like you count the cost before you build a building, right? So in anything, you already know, and I've gone through and I've thought, what is the opposition or what are the challenges going to be? And I have calculated that cost. And many times that is a personal cost. Many times that is what is the cost to your family. That means that, maybe my daughter's spending a little more time with her dad this summer than she is with me because I have, a campaign and I'm a sitting legislator and I have work, but thankfully she is cared for, she is safe, and she is still in community. Right. So, you definitely count the cost of everything. But as a person that's resilient, as a person that doesn't give up, as a person that, I don't see that when I see a challenge, I don't see this as something that's going to stop me. Right. I think of it as, okay, it may be a no right now, but that no is a not yet. Right. So how do I keep pushing and persevering to get past that?
As we close, I want to give you an opportunity to leave us with anything that, we didn't touch on, maybe a question I didn't ask or something we didn't get into that you want to extrapolate on and talk to community, talk to voters about. And I want to give you that time and space to do that now.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. So this message is to the voters of District 52. I am running for you, and I would love to earn your vote. I am hardworking, I'm dedicated, and I believe one of the most important things is having a strong moral compass. So when you trust your leadership and when you trust that this person has a strong moral compass, you know that they're going to vote on the right side of issues. I won't claim to be the expert on everything because no one is the expert on everything. But what I do is I do my research and I do my due diligence so that I can make sure that anything I'm voting on, any policy that I bring forth, any type of legislation is well vetted and it will be in the best interest of the people that I serve. So I'm asking you to help me get there. The work that I've been able to do on council, the successes that I've had on council, the legislation that I've been able to pass, the policies that I've been able to impact, the lives that I've been able to touch and change, I've done that on a city level and I want to do that on a state level. And I want to do that for you and for us and for our community, but I don't get there without you. So if you're in District 52, I'm asking you to trust me and I'm asking you for your vote. On August the 4th, I'm asking you to go out and vote Poterfield. Early voting starts July the 15th. It's from July 15th to July 30th. I'm asking you for your vote. I'm asking you to volunteer your time. I'm asking you for donations because guess what? Campaigns cost money and it's uncomfortable. People don't want to talk about it. But the only way that we get this message out to people is through donations and through volunteers. So you can go to my website, www.delishiaforhouse.com. You can go to any of my social media sites, Delishia TN. That's on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. There are donation links on there. There are opportunities to sign up. I need you all to help be ambassadors with me and spread the word. And what I can guarantee, what I can promise you, and what other organizations that I've been in community with, they tell you, I do not turn my back on people. I work with people, I work hard, and I'm ready to work for you. So with that, District 52, I'm asking you for your vote.
Delishia, I appreciate your time, and I enjoyed our conversation. Hope you enjoyed it too. And I know the viewers and the listeners, I know they always enjoy every conversation. But no, thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
Voters, vote. This is crucial times, and we need people that are going to push the envelope, and we need folks that are going to be in community, and that is the role of state representatives, to be in community, which you already do anyway. So that's gonna be easy, kind of transitioning the role for you. But these are crucial times. These are urgent times. So keep doing your research. Reach out. Go to all the contact information that she's presented, and support if that's something you feel in your heart you need to do. But thank you for your availability, on the campaign to stop through Deep Dish Conversations, and gotta have you back.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity.
For sure. All right. That's it.